Hello and welcome to another episode of Advancement in Clinical Trials. I'm Rittika Dutta, your host for today. And as someone who's obsessed with changing the face of biomedical science, joining me today is someone whose insights I've been meaning to bring to the show for a while. Sumanth Mayur, who holds a master's in pharmacology from Lovely Professional University. Sumanth, welcome.
Thanks so much, Ritika. Super excited to be here, especially since clinical trials and AI are colliding in fascinating way lately.
Let's jump right in. Traditional trial design is grounded in statistical hypothesis testing. But now, with machine learning in the mix, we are talking about predicting trial outcomes even before the first patient walks in. Sumant, how does this shift the paradigm?
Right. This is where things get exciting. Traditionally, you start with a hypothesis, run a trial, then find out after the fact whether it worked. But with machine learning, we can simulate outcomes before the first patient is even enrolled. It's like, test driving your trial before you spend millions running it. We are moving from let's see what happens to let's see what's likely. That shift from reactive to predictive completely changes how we think about trial design.
Speaking of these simulations, a lot of them are run on synthetic populations and real world data. How do we know we are not just generating realistic sounding pictures?
Well, that's a great question and a tough one, to be honest. Just because a model generates something doesn't mean it reflects reality. So the question is, do these synthetic cohorts behave like real patients? That's where validation comes in. We stress test predictions against outcomes, external datasets, and sometimes real trials. If your synthetic model predicts what actually happened in prior studies, you're on firmer ground. Otherwise, you're basically flying a plane. You're built only in the Minecraft.
Right, that makes sense. And that leads to the issue of bias baked into training data. If we are training machine learning models on trials that excluded entire population or used outdated therapies, what kind of blind spots are we building into our models?
Ritika, with that question, you nailed it. Actually, a lot of historical trial data is well narrow, white, male, mid 40s, and based on case standards from 10 years ago. So, when we train ML models on the data, we risk baking in the same blind spots and systemic biases. The danger, you ask, these models might not perform well for women, minorities, or newer patient populations. That's why we need to audit datasets and diversify our training inputs, just like we are trying to diversify trials themselves.
That makes me wonder, can unsupervised or generative models help us discover new endpoints or outcome chapters that traditional trials would never even consider?
I would say definitely. This is where AI gets creative. So unsupervised learning is like panning for gold in a river of patient data. You might uncover clusters or outcomes that no one even thought to look for. Say a symptom pattern that strongly correlates with long term remission, that could become a new endpoint. But here's the catch: discovery is one thing, and validation is everything. So we need to test those endpoints in new studies prospectively to make sure they are real and reproducible.
Explainability is a big hurdle. Regulators aren't usually thrilled about black box models, especially when we are talking about optimizing dosages or sample sizes. Uh, what's the balance here?
It's the same, again, age old AI problem, power versus explainability. Deep learning models can optimize dosing or predict outcomes incredibly well, but they are not great at telling you why. And regulators, they need a why. So either we need interpretability tools like SHAP or LIME, or we use simpler models for the parts of the trial that matter most for compliance. In early discovery, you might ask, sure, go full black box. But in dose optimization, clarity wins.
Let's talk about surrogate endpoints. Um, how are machine learning models identifying and validating them? And what does that mean for fast track approvals?
ML can spot variables like lab values or biomarkers that consistently predict clinical outcomes. These can become surrogate endpoints, helping fast track approvals when waiting for actual clinical endpoints would take years. But we have got to be careful because predictive isn't always casual. So regulators still expect biological plausibility and multi trial validation. Think of ML as the flashlight, not the judge.
This one's exciting. Could reinforcement learning allow real-time protocol adjustment, for example, switching arms or preventing dropouts without breaking statistical integrity?
Well, in theory, absolutely. Reinforcement learning could allow dynamic trial adjustments, like switching patients between arms or tweaking dosages based on how the trial is performing. But in practice, regulatory bodies aren't quite ready to hand over the wheel. We are starting to see this in adaptive trials and Bayesian frameworks, but it's still early. The dream is real time personalization within a trial, and we are just not quite there yet.
And what about in silico patient cohorts? How useful are they for preemptively flagging risky trial design?
Well, these are virtual patient models built from real world data, and they're a game changer for pre trial planning. Well, let's say imagine simulating 50 trial designs and spotting which ones crash before even recruiting a patient. And in silico cohorts helps us flag risks early, test feasibility, and even estimate dropout rates, especially in rare diseases where patients are few and stakes are very high. These simulations can save time, money, and lives.
So, with all these predictive power, how are sponsors and academic units balancing machine learning outputs with human intuitions and ethical oversight?
Ah, this is all about augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So, sponsors use AI to guide decision making, not replace it. You will still see ethics boards, clinical leads, statisticians, all weighing in. It's a collaboration. AI suggests and human decide. If anything, AI makes expert judgment more critical, not less.
To close the show, I would like to narrow down on a very philosophical question. Does bringing machine learning into clinical trials shift the design from the center of innovation to that from biology to data science?
I would like to say it's a seismic shift. We used to focus on molecules before, and now we are focusing on models. But it's not like either or, it's convergence. Biology gives us the questions, data science gives us the tools to answer them at scale. And if you ask long term, we will need clinical trial teams with biologists, data scientists, ethicists, and software engineers all working together. The lab coat and the laptop now sit side by side.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to share it with a fellow researcher or clinician. We'll be back soon with more conversations at the edge of biology, data, and design. Thank you.